Excited to have you join us online. You are in the session positioning AI as a tool, not an authority, responsible AI for an informed public. If you're looking for a different virtual session, you can find Zoom links on Sketch, and I will put the link password in the chat. Oh, thank you, Devin. Devin will do that. My name is Tiffany Messer-Baz, and I am the moderator for this session. I want to share a few things before we begin. At NC Live events, we value the presence and active participation of all attendees. By joining us, you agree to uphold the principles of our code of conduct, which can be found on our website. And that link is also in the chat. In the interest of time, we will save Q&A for the end of the presentation. So if you have a question, you can put it in the Q&A box or in the chat, which can be found in your Zoom toolbar at the bottom of the screen. We will be monitoring the Q&A and the chat in case anyone needs assistance. Please make sure that you stay muted during the presentation, and this session is also being recorded. The presenter slides will be posted after the conference if you would like to access them later. And I am pleased to introduce Chris Brown. Chris is the librarian for instruction and technical services at Fayetteville Technical Community College. She earned her MLIS from the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. Her professional experience spans public libraries, small college libraries, university libraries, and community college libraries, providing her with a broad perspective on academic instruction, technical services, and information across diverse communities. So without further ado, I will hand it over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Tiffany, for the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Chris. I'm a librarian here at Fayetteville Tech. I have been here, I think, at least 12 years. Today, I want to discuss what many of us are already seeing in a lot of our classrooms, which is students using AI as part of their research process. So the question is no longer whether students are using AI. They already are, but the real question is how do we help them use these tools responsibly, critically, and ethically? My approach is not anti-AI. I think we should get ahead of it because we are uniquely positioned to teach students how to evaluate any of the AI-generated content that they are using in place of the larger research process. Why does this matter? This matters because AI is quickly becoming the default starting point for many of our students. We notice here that this is where they begin. Instead of beginning with the basic Google search or databases, they are opting to use ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot, or any other AI tools first. The challenge is that information is faster, but it's not necessarily better. Students often mistake this fluency for AI, that it's more accurate than their own research process. So if something sounds confident, which usually AI does, they tend to use it and assume that it's trustworthy. But informed decision-making, it really depends on more than just the speed of information. You have to verify it. You have to look at the context. It has to be transparent, and you also need to be aware of the source. So this is where information literacy still matters deeply within the student and academic research process. With the community college, we have a variety of different students in this population. They come from diverse educational backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds. Some of our students are actually first-generation college students. Some are returning adult learners. Some are actually balancing work, childcare, and school simultaneously, which is why they, love the research with ChatGPT or any other generative AI models. We also work with students that have varying literacy levels or very little confidence in the academic research process. So when AI gives them fast answers in plain language, it just seems correct. But that also means that students may not immediately recognize the inaccuracies, the biases, and the missing context of AI-generated information. So this is why our role as librarians is not simply teaching databases anymore. We have to emphasize information literacy and teaching how to evaluate the information that is out there. So here are some learning outcomes that we will cover in this presentation. We're going to focus on 4 main areas. One is understanding how students are currently using AI in research. Another is that we're going to discuss a structured approach for integrating AI into library instruction without replacing our traditional research skills. We are also going to identify the risk of uncritically using AI. And then finally, we can explore some strategies that actually help students move from AI generated content information to verified traceable sources. So how students are actually using AI is very predictable. They use it to brainstorm topics, of course, to summarize articles. They also rewrite content. I think like AI was always used to rewrite content because most students still use Grammarly. They can generate outlines and also simplify information. Sometimes those uses are relatively harmless, and often they're even productive. But students relying solely on AI instead of engaging with the research process itself can be just a little dangerous, but we also have to acknowledge why they are doing it. But why they are doing it is it's easier, it's faster, it's less intimidating. For students that are overwhelmed, especially those that are struggling with confidence or time management, AI can feel like a relief. So instead of pretending that they don't use it, what we could do is just teach them how to use it responsibly. So this is just an image of what we use, a general image of what we use while we're in the classroom teaching library instruction. So students usually just start with a very, very broad topic. So it starts with the starting point, not an ending point. Then they use AI tools to explore ideas. So what we suggest that students do is they can use it to generate keywords or subject terms, because usually that is what most students have the most trouble with when it comes to the research process is the keywords. Also, they can narrow down the research question. So if it's too broad, it can help to narrow it down to ask a specific question within the general broad research. But after that, they must move into the library resources. So this is when we use Trojan Quest, which is what we branded Summon, the Gale databases, CQ Researcher, and then just the general sources of peer-reviewed articles and other credible source material. And then comes the most important step of the research process is to evaluate the information. We want to evaluate the output of AI, of the AI content. So what's missing, what claims are supported, what needs further verification, and this is where the real learning happens. So an actual hardcore example in the classroom that we like to use, one is should Medicaid be expanded? And this is really an interactive session while we're in the classroom here. So students might often begin asking AI for just a general overview, and the output for AI, it might be balanced, it might sound complete, but there's always information missing. It might mention healthcare access, you'll see points of public health, it will mention cost concerns, and then you can see that it will also give you other keyword terms and subject terms to further your research. But then we compare these responses to the actual library resources. So students start noticing missing perspectives, definitely conflicting statistics and data, and then oversimplified claims. So because we don't know where this information is coming from. And then at that moment, students usually, think what information is being left out, what is inaccurate, What other information do we need? We need other references, and where did this information come from? And this is where we go to tracing the sources. So this shift happens because of passive acceptance. It actually turns into active questioning and active learning. And this is what the educators really want. So these are our most used resources whenever we are using the library's resources to validate any and all AI output. So we use the Trojan Quest or other discovery tools. Our Trojan Quest is Summon. We use the Gale databases we use Gale databases, especially opposing viewpoints and context, because it gives you both points of view for and against. But we also have the social issues. CQ research actually helps with policies, understanding policies and issues that's currently going on, especially with the detailed reports. And then we tell them reflect on peer-reviewed sources. They are evidence-based and backed up. And then we also have the primary sources and the statistics and data, because with AI, it has an issue with hallucinating information, especially when the output consists of data and numbers. We tell them to actually verify that information before they actually use it as a source. Some of the democratic risk of uncritical AI usage. Definitely hallucinating facts, especially statistics. We emphasize this a lot. The hidden biases of AI. The biases are the biases that we as humans input within the algorithms. So whatever we input, whatever our hidden biases are, that's what AI does. It will output those same biases. So AI is usually based on patterns and not necessarily rules, but it's patterns of human behavior. Authority without accountability, and also a loss of source awareness. So they really need to trace the sources in which they are receiving their information. Oh, okay. So here's an example of some biases. One is Amazon was using an AI tool for hiring purposes, and they noticed that their AI tool had favored male candidates over women candidates. So they later had to scrap that AI tool. I think they just published another one, or they're in the process of using another one. But there was one, I think it was like 2018 or 2019 or so, that they were using a hiring tool for workers, for employees. There are also higher error rates in facial recognition for darker skinned people. And AI just learns from historical data. So our historical data, our historical biases, that's what AI outputs. But I did a screenshot of Google Gemini and ChatGPT of the same prompt to see if I can generate an image, to see if there are any biases within the, AI algorithms that I can actually see. So in Gemini, I did prompt it to generate me an image of a disabled leader with a group, speaking with a group, and Gemini responded, it looks like there's no response available for this search. Try asking something else. And, after confirming to make sure I spelled everything correctly, just making sure I just didn't make a mistake. I did ask again, and it still would not give me an image. It would not generate me an image in Gemini. However, in ChatGPT, it did a lot better. I gave the same exact prompt, generate an image of a disabled leader speaking with a group. And it did generate me an image of a man in a wheelchair. And then you'll see the image that was created. A diverse team collaborating in a modern office. So I'm not saying that, this is one of the biases. I'm just not sure why Gemini would not create this image for me. But it should have been, I think it just should have been easier to create. a disabled leader, but ChatGPT did it for me. So ChatGPT, and there was another major AI model that did have a recent update. So I just wanted to see if the biases were consistent. So I knew that ChatGPT did that, but I can't remember which of the other AI models did. But I prompted all the big three, Copilot, Gemini, and ChatGPT, to generate an image of a house in Congo for me. And I did, I asked all three. And then I did the same for a house in the United States. Now, as for Congo, Copilot and Gemini, they both gave me like these hut style houses. And then you see like this brown palette. And ChatGPT did a little better, but you can still see the brown palette background like in the muddied yard. I actually have a friend that lives in Congo, and she says most people do not live in huts. Like most people don't live in these. Like these are just villages, but most people don't live like this. In Congo, most people live in the major cities, and houses vary. Houses vary, neighborhoods vary, and cities are busy. I think in Kinshasa, there's 18 million people. But they also generated the larger houses for the United States. And then you'll see that all the houses in the United States, they are split level. They have like 2-car garages, manicured yards. They really look nice. So either way, there's these assumptions of what Congo may look like versus what the United States look like. And then you see at the very bottom of the slide here, this is a house that's for sale in Kinshasa, DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo. And most people, they live in these compounds or villas, but they don't live in these huts, that Copilot and Gemini had generated. I see that ChatGPT did a little bit better, but it's just that brown palette of the muddied and dirty yard. So there's still work to do as far as AI generating and stereotypes. But the thing is like this is actually a clear image of how AI can have inaccurate information. They make assumptions, and it explains the biases. So not only just the images, but any information that it puts out. Another risk, authority. So authority without any accountability. People are using AI for medical advice or medical diagnosis, legal advice. They make financial decisions. And if AI is giving dangerous or inaccurate information, who's responsible? If a medical professional or a legal professional is giving you bad advice, you can sue, you can hold them accountable. But if AI is wrong, who's responsible? Because a tool cannot be accountable. And then this is just a screenshot from an NPR article from March of this year, where studies showed that ChatGPT might be giving you bad medical advice. I do understand that a lot of people are using ChatGPT as companions, as therapists, also as friends. So this is like one of the important things about authority. They're giving it authority because it does sound confident. It sounds correct. Also, loss of source awareness. So no verifiable sources. AI can give you broken links. There's also incorrect identification of sources, and they just completely make up information. So this is where we come in as librarians, where our skills are still needed to teach research through the library databases. It's still important for us to teach them how to evaluate credible information, and they need to understand the importance of authorship. And this is a Reddit thread in which an instructor found that a student used 5 out of 7 of her sources did not exist. The paper was completely fabricated. I think the instructor had some type of hint that the paper that the student submitted was AI. And then you can see down here that there was a journal article that was referenced that did exist. The volumes existed, but not the author, the title, or the page numbers. So instruction strategies that we found that work so far, comparing the AI output to database sources. That way students can actually see what AI leaves out and then what do the database sources output. Also point out biases, gaps, and inaccurate information, especially with the images that I showed you guys previously with the houses in Congo, but definitely with the statistics. Anytime it spits out a number, we tell students to fact check that. We require citation tracing, and this is usually up to the instructor. But we tell students to use Perplexity because it at least attempts to give you the sources of information in which they are getting their information from. But if you're going to use one of the big three, one of the major ones, we tell them to ask AI to verify the information. You know, say, Gemini, where did you get this from? Or Copilot, where did you get this from? Information literacy is civic literacy. I think we all are responsible for making sure that any information that we are sharing or reading is credible. So, you know, students need to learn to evaluate. They need to recognize bias. They need to understand the context. They are developing skills necessary for informed participation in society. And we as libraries, we are going to support democracy, not because we simply provide information, but because we help people evaluate their information. Okay, some of the challenges that we've had here. We are a community college. We do not have an information literacy course where we can go into detail with explaining information literacy or library research. And many of our library instruction sessions are, you know, they can't go more than 40 minutes or so. So we are very limited on time for in-depth instruction. So being that some instructors don't want any AI involved in the library instruction, we either teach information literacy that includes AI, or we just go straight to the databases. But we are very, very limited on time here at Federal Tech. Faculty buy-in is a funny one because there are some faculty members who do not want us teaching AI at all. It's cheating, and that's it. But most faculty members are, you know, okay with it once if we can get into the department meetings and we actually tell them like what we're doing. We're not teaching them to cheat. We're trying to get in front of it. Also, our library does not have an AI policy. So we just use just information literacy frameworks from ALA and ACRL, but we have no formal AI policy here at Federal Tech, well, at the library. Students are still too confident in AI because it does sound confident, and you know, it sounds correct. And also, we are a community college. We have a lot of adult learners with busy lives. So AI is faster. So our instruction cannot be simply don't use AI. We have to be practical. We have to be realistic with approaches, and we have to meet the students where they are. Ethical AI use is a library value. So this slide highlights why libraries are still essential to the AI era. I think like a lot of people really believes that we're not going to be needed anymore, but I think we are. I think we're still needed more than ever. AI systems lack transparency and accountability. We are, in contrast, we are grounded in verifying sources, access to equity, and guided access to information. And libraries have always existed to help people navigate complex information environments. So AI simply changes what the environment looks like, but we are still needed here. Libraries as institutions of trust. We remain trusted institutions because we have professional standards and we are committed to credible information. But trust also comes from education. We are not gatekeepers of information. We are actually helping educators and students develop lifelong skills to evaluate and participate in the information systems that continue to evolve all the time. So going forward, AI literacy, it must be embedded into library instruction, and information literacy, it's not an option. So therefore, our information literacy classes, it has to expand to include AI evaluation. And AI is everywhere. It's even on social media. Libraries remain essential to democracy, and it's important for an informed public. So some key takeaways from this presentation. AI just changes how information is produced. Libraries can still teach how to evaluate it. Democracy helps an informed democracy, and an informed life depends on both evaluating and how to produce information. And I just want to emphasize that, you know, AI is a tool. It doesn't replace anything. The thing is even when using generative AI, it still needs human empathy. It still needs human judgment. So this is definitely just a tool. And I think we just need to emphasize that not only to the students, but also to the instructors. And that way we can, you know, sort of get them to relax, because we still do have some instructors here who are absolutely against it. But being that it's here, I don't think there's anything, it's not going away. It won't go away. So here's some references here for further reading, some references that I also use for this presentation. And if you have any questions,